Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. I'm continuing my Sopranos rewatch today with Season 1, Episode 6, Pax Soprana, which originally aired on February 14th, 1999. This episode is the first one written by Frank Renzulli, who primarily worked as a producer on the show for the first 2 seasons. He would end up writing 9 total episodes. This is also the first episode directed by Alan Taylor, a prolific television director who directed several episodes of Homicide: Life on the Streets, among others. He directed 9 episodes of The Sopranos and the Many Saints of Newark movie that came out later, but this is the only episode he directed in Season 1. The title of this episode, Pax Soprana, is a play on the term Pax Romana, a long period of unparalleled peace in the Roman Empire. How is peace maintained in the Sopranos Empire? Let's find out. Characters. This is the first episode to feature John Sacramone, aka Johnny Sack. Johnny Sack is the underboss of the Luperazzi crime family, one of the New York families mentioned in the pilot episode. Johnny Sack appears in 32 episodes, which is more than 1/3 of the entire series. He and Tony have an evolving friendship over the course of the show. This episode is the first and only unfortunate appearance of Rusty Irish, a small-time drug dealer. So much for the luck of the Irish. There's a conspicuous absence of regulars in this episode. Silvio, Paulie, AJ, and Meadow, I meant to say Fielder, are all absent. But they'll be back, like the Terminator. For existing characters, this episode shows a great deal of progression. Livia continues her campaign of manipulative sabotage, and as Junior rightfully points out, she's furious with her son over being put into a nursing home. A retirement community. For Carmela, this episode continues her personal conflicts with Tony regarding his infidelity and neglect. In the prior episode, Carmela discovered that Tony's therapist, Dr. Melfi, is a woman, something that Tony failed to mention. This triggers Carmela's suspicions that Tony is being unfaithful, or else why would he lie? This conflict continues in this episode. This episode also continues Carmela's obsession with material comfort, and how she uses it as a means to cope with her emotional distress, going about in pity for herself. She mentions to Tony that they could go to the Plaza Hotel on their anniversary, something they did last year. Carmela must really like the Plaza Hotel. She and her daughter have or had a tradition of going there for tea and scones every year. Also, Carmela spends a ton of money on new furniture when she's mad at Tony. And when Carmela seeks guidance from Father Phil, he reminds her that she isn't innocent in all this, and that you reap what you sow. This is a reminder of her confession in the prior episode, in which Carmela confessed that she knew Tony was an evil criminal, but she married him anyway, so she could have a lavish lifestyle. Carmela also uses the term chifos in this episode, which means ugly or gross person. This parallels Livia's use of the term che bruta, which also means ugly face. The first time I saw this episode, I didn't know what these Italian words meant, but I also wondered if Carmela and Livia aren't entirely different, given how freely they use semi-vulgar slang to describe anyone they don't like, which says a lot about Carmela since she acts as though she's morally upright. This is the first episode where we get to see Junior as boss of the Sopranos family. Technically, the real boss is Ercole Di Maio, but he's serving time in prison and therefore is boss in name only. Junior's the street boss. The shot of Junior looking all dignified in his new suit and how it cuts to show him in his underpants is kind of funny. But it also seems to be suggesting that there's a difference between the strong, imposing image he's projecting and the reality that Junior is kind of a frail old man. Junior has waited a long time and has a chip on his shoulder. This reminds me of what Hesh says about Junior in the pilot episode. Man is driven in toto by his insecurities. Tony's father was Junior's younger brother, yet Johnny Boy Soprano was not only boss before Junior, but was also a made guy before Junior was. Junior is envious of his younger brother's success eclipsing his own, even though he's the older sibling. A similar dynamic plays out in The Godfather 2 regarding Fredo's envy of Michael. When Junior visits Livia, she asks if he's wearing canoe, and Junior says, "Johnny wore canoe." Junior is wearing the same cologne that his brother used to wear while visiting his brother's widow. If that doesn't indicate that he's comparing himself to Johnny, I don't know what does. Livia seems to hint that she knows this when she mentions that, in reference to Junior's recent tenure as boss, better men than him had to work hard, which I think is a reference to Johnny Boy Soprano being the better man, or one of them. This chip on his shoulder attitude also impacts his business decisions. Something Hesh mentions in this episode is that he doesn't take issue with Junior taxing him, but the amount is excessive. I like the characterization of Hesh here. He respects the rules of the mob world. Christopher says nearly the same thing in 46 Long when Junior demands outrageous tribute. He doesn't mind paying, but the amount is outrageous. This is good characterization for both Hesh and Christopher, but it also says a lot about Junior when 2 separate associates note how demanding he is. Junior is insecure about his place in the mob family. Having been passed over earlier in his life, he's determined to gain respect and be noticed. Ironically, this is a bit of a parallel with Carmela, who spends money to gain attention and be noticed in her marriage. On the other hand, a big caveat is how Tony asks for Bloomfield and the paving union as his asking price to back Junior as boss in Meadowlands. Junior is so happy to be boss he agrees without hesitation. But is Junior levying these steep new taxes to make up for lost income? Is Junior greedy now because of Tony's earlier greed? Is that what Larry Boy's joke is about when he says, if you owe Tony a dime, you'll hear some great speeches? I don't know. What do you think? There's a lot of characterization here for Tony. Tony tells Junior about Octavian Caesar and the Pax Romana, which is what this episode's title, Pax Soprana, refers to. Tony loves history. Junior also tells Tony that Tony did indeed have the makings of a varsity athlete. Tony had a baseball swing like Joe DiMaggio, but Tony was too busy chasing skirt to practice and put in the work. This is contrary to what Tony says in the pilot, about Junior telling him he never had the makings of a varsity athlete. One of them isn't telling the truth, or maybe Junior said it many decades ago but was referring not to Tony's lack of talent, but his lack of work ethic. Given how Tony is a bit of an unreliable narrator, especially with Dr. Melfi, it's hard to know for sure. The Shadow Prince. Although Junior is the street boss and de facto leader of the Sopranos family, Tony is running things behind the scenes, undermining Junior's leadership to the point that Junior is boss in name only, just like Ercole. This hits home when Tony meets Johnny Sack. Johnny mentions, "You are still running things, aren't you?" This also brings up an unspoken point. In Meadowlands, New York backed Junior for boss, but based on what Johnny, the underboss of the Lupertazzi family, knows about Tony running things behind the scenes, why would they still back Junior for boss instead of Tony? Do they think Tony would make a bad boss? Or are they being politically savvy, knowing that if they fail to negotiate with Junior, they have a back channel to Tony who can pull the strings of the Jersey crew? Given what we eventually find out about Carmine Sr., it could be a combination of both. Livia also continues to parallel Tony in this episode. She's effectively doing the same thing by manipulating Junior into taxing Hesh in the first place. This sets up the indirect conflict between Tony and his mother for the rest of the season. It's strange that although Tony loves history, he doesn't seem to learn from it. Raymond points out that he created a Frankenstein by making Junior boss. This is a mistake that Tony really should have learned in Denial, Anger, Acceptance, when he made a deal with the Hasidic Jews, who thought they could control Tony only to find out that they created a living golem. Tony has made the same mistake by backing Junior for boss, and thinking that he can control him without any negative consequences. This, combined with Livia yanking Junior's ear, will lead to the inevitable open conflict between Tony and Junior by the end of the season. Despite that, Junior does show concern for Tony's well-being, and although Tony is being manipulative, he does seem to be trying to help Junior in the way that he can. That's why the title of this episode is so fitting. They're both making an effort to keep the peace. There is also a hidden parallel in this episode. Tony's relationship with Junior is a substitute for his father, much in the same way that Melfi is a substitute for the women in Tony's life. In this episode, Tony confesses his love for Melfi. There's the two dreams about her, though I always thought this infatuation began in Meadowlands, in which the opening scene is Tony having a dream and asking Melfi what they're going to talk about with a little smirk on his face. And he tries to kiss her despite her not appearing to be into it. Why is Tony so determined? At the beginning of this episode, Vin asks Tony why he's so curious about Melfi. In Meadowlands, his concern was security, but why keep spying on her? Tony doesn't seem to fully understand himself. This is something that often happens with those with cluster B personality disorders. They want what they can't have and push boundaries to try to take it. The conflict over gifts harkens back to the pilot episode, in which Melfi tells Tony that for therapy to work, they have to lay down some ground rules. Rules that Tony at some point will try to break, if he wants. Now, it's time to talk about the plot. Though I've never had the makings of a varsity plotter, which is a tremendous blow to my self-esteem. Tony and Melfi. This episode begins with the Tony-Melfi plotline. Tony meets Detective McKazian at a construction site. I love the detail of Vin filling out a crossword puzzle in the newspaper while he waits for Tony to arrive. Tony has had Vin spy on Melfi, and Vin fills him in. Tony is also angry with Vin for beating up Randall, Melfi's date, earlier. Vin reveals here that he assumed Melfi was Tony's Gumar, which is why he was so hostile to Randall. Vin tells Tony he doesn't know what he's looking for, and Tony doesn't tell him. Tony initially asks Vin to start spying on Melfi in Meadowlands due to concerns over his own security, but Tony has become infatuated with her. Tony then goes to therapy. He was traveling in the prior episode, so this is his first therapy session since Meadowlands. He brings coffee for himself and Melfi, though she doesn't seem comfortable with the gift. Melfi asks Tony about the college trip he took with his daughter, and Tony conveniently omits the fact that he killed a guy as he sips his coffee. This coincidentally reminded me of the pilot, in which Melfi asks him about McAfee, and Tony says, "Nothing, we had coffee." Tony then tells Melfi about Carmela being mad at him when Carmela found out that Dr. Melfi is a woman, since Carmela assumed Tony's therapist was a man. Melfi asks the obvious: why didn't Tony tell Carmela the truth? She also asks why did Tony choose her to be his therapist. Tony says it's because Melfi is a fellow Italian-American, but Melfi points out that psychologically, she's a symbolic stand-in for Tony's mother, wife, and daughter, and he's able to tell her things that he subconsciously wishes he could tell them. Tony retorts by asking Melfi why she agreed to take him on as a patient, since a shrink with any sense would never do so. Tony then sees Irina and he has trouble performing. Tony talks to her, opening up to his grimoire in the way that he does with his therapist. This could be an effort by Tony to prove Melfi wrong, when she claimed that Tony tells Melfi the things that he wishes he could tell the other women in his life. But this goes poorly and Irina burns him with a candle. Tony then has an X-rated dream. Turns out his dream partner is Melfi, but the voice is Irina for some reason. Tony goes to another therapy session, and Melfi addresses the coffee situation with a new rule: no gifts. Melfi also has a car emergency and seems to think her mechanic is robbing her with unnecessary repairs. Tony says he might flush his medication due to his male performance problem. Melfi is quick to diagnose his issue as not physiological in nature. She laughs at Tony's prostate joke, which encourages Tony's continued infatuation with her. Tony has a dream at home that night of a naked woman in the shower who turns out to be Melfi. When he sees Irina later, he suggests she wear something more professional, which she interprets as him wanting her to dress like a prostitute, which doesn't go over well. Tony then goes to Melfi therapy session number 3. Tony tells Melfi about Irina burning him with a candle and suggesting she dress differently, but he lies and says both these events occurred with Carmela and not Irina. Tony professes he finds Melfi attractive and he tries to kiss her. Melfi does not share his enthusiasm. Later, Melfi is at home reading. She hears a dog and sounds around her car, reminiscent of Randall being stalked in Meadowlands. Melfi takes her car to an auto shop, but her car starter is somehow already replaced and therefore fix a root. Tony then goes to therapy session number 4 with Melfi. She wants to discuss how his unprompted kissing of her is probably more inappropriate than him bringing her unsolicited coffee. Tony smugly asks how her car is, which angers Melfi since her privacy is being violated. Tony says he loves Melfi, but she reminds him that it's her job to be gentle and sympathetic to him. Tony has mentally made Melfi into what's missing in Tony's wife and mother. Tony says Melfi can't use Freud on him and offers to discontinue therapy if Melfi doesn't want to keep him as a patient, but Melfi insists he continue with their sessions, and that all this is a byproduct of progress. Junior and Hesh. The Junior and Hesh plotline actually begins with Mikey, who goes to a card game and punches the host, Sammy Grigio. Mikey only asks after beating Sammy if he's paying anyone for the game. In '99, when this aired, I was a bit confused at first, but in the mob world, something as simple as a card game, or anything illegal such as gambling, is something that can be taxed. This is what Mikey means when he asks Sammy if he's paying anyone for the game. Sammy does drop Jimmy's name, meaning he's part of Jimmy Altieri's crew. Afterwards, Junior is at his tailor getting fit for a new suit. His tailor is grief-stricken over the loss of his 14-year-old grandson, who self-deleted at Patterson Falls after taking drugs. Junior asks for the dealer's name, and it's pretty obvious whoever it is a dead man walking. Junior then visits Livia at Green Grove, where even the coffee is old. Livia wants Junior to not let people take advantage of his good nature, then implies that Junior should tax Hesh. At Satrial's, Hesh stops by to see Tony and asks him for help. Junior is back-taxing Hesh $500,000 and 2 points, or 2%, of his shy business. Tony is furious that his uncle is creating problems immediately after being made boss, but tells Hesh to sit tight, which ironically is the name of the diner Junior owns. At the River Cafe in New York City, Tony meets with Johnny Sack and conspires to have New York step in and negotiate on Hesh's behalf regarding the severe back taxes. They have a sit-down at Satrial's. Johnny Sack and Tony pretend that they haven't been going behind Junior's back and conspiring, and then Hesh negotiates the back tax down to $250,000, half the original amount. At Patterson Falls, Mikey throws Rusty Irish, the dealer who sold drugs to the tailor's son, off the bridge. At Satrial's, Tony has a chat with the other capos, who are disgruntled with Junior as boss. Rusty Irish, the dealer Mikey whacked, was the top earner for Larry Boy. Raymond says that Junior eats alone, meaning he doesn't share the spoils with others, whereas Jackie Sr. would make sure things evened out at the end of the day. Jimmy is upset about Mikey beating up Sammy Grigio at his card game earlier. The other capos all agree that the moment Sammy dropped Jimmy's name, it should have been the end of the discussion. This is because Junior is making something of a mafia's faux pas here. Although he is the boss of the family and has the authority to tax Sammy's game, Sammy is a member of Jimmy's crew. Informally, Junior should have spoken to Jimmy about this game and asked him to kick up money from the card game. Junior would then tax Sammy and pass an extra envelope to Junior. By confronting Sammy directly, he's circumventing and undermining Jimmy's authority as a capo. Tony then visits Olivia at Green Grove. Tony asks and tries to semi-manipulate his mother into telling Junior that he's messing up the family business, since Olivia clearly has Junior's ear. But she insists she doesn't want to get involved, even though she already is. Since manipulating his own mother doesn't work, Tony meets Junior at a Little League game. He gives Junior an unwanted Roman history lesson and a joke about cow intercourse to indirectly tell him to stop going about and read for himself. Tony then meets Hesh at Hesh's horse farm. Hesh tells Tony that Junior might end up being a good boss. Tony tells Hesh that Junior divided the $250K back tax he levied among the 5 Sopranos family capos, and Tony gives him his $50,000 share since he doesn't want to profit from his friend's tax. At a dinner with Junior and his capos, Tony makes a toast to the new boss. Waiters there have these discreet button cameras, and the final scene shows an FBI agent at a field office looking at these new photos taken from Junior's coronation dinner. He removes the photo of Jackie Aprile Sr., the former Sopranos family boss, who recently died of cancer, and moves Junior from the position of capo to boss. Carmela. The Carmela plot begins at the River Cafe in New York City, where Tony and her are having dinner to celebrate their 18th anniversary. Carmela is upset that Tony met with Johnny Sack in the middle of their anniversary dinner. Tony argues that it was just 10 minutes and that she's being dramatic. Carmen is upset and laments that at least she knows where she stands. They go home and in the garage they briefly chat. Tony blames the Prozac he's taking, the subtext being that he's having some performance issues. And Carmela clearly resents Melfi and her advice. Later, Carmela buys an excessive quantity of furniture from Roche Boys. Tony is upset that Carmela is spending like a drunken sailor. This is something Melfi mentions in a therapy session. Carmela's spending might be her way of forcing Tony to notice her and gain attention. At church, Carm meets Father Phil, and Father Phil suggests having Tony more involved in the church. Carmela's dilemma is that she's encouraged Tony to remain in therapy, but is ultimately jealous of Melfi's ability to help guide Tony through his emotions. She's actually less jealous of Tony's remorse, who only offer a physical outlet for him. Phil tells Carmela that divorce is for the weak and that she should pay for guidance and understanding. Later, Tony and Carm are by the pool at home. Tony insists there's nothing between Melfi and him, and which isn't entirely true, but oh well. Carmela decides that she would like Tony to stick with his therapy, despite her jealousy over Melfi's ability to help Tony, something she and her faith can't seem to do. And Tony tells Carmela that she is his life, and they make up. It's kind of fitting that Tony and Carmela reconcile in front of the pool, where the ducks were in episode 1. And that's the end of the Carmela plotline. And now it's time for themes. What was it all about? Or is it all big nothing? What makes me think I'm so special? Well, one of the themes here is charity, both in Tony's personal and business life, and whether someone accepts charity or rejects it. When Tony doesn't give Carmela the attention she wants, she begins spending like a drunken sailor. This is on top of her already luxurious late 1990s lifestyle. Irina, however, throws Tony's cash back at him and insists she's not a prostitute and she doesn't want his money. When Hesh is being shaken down for $500K, Tony tells him to sit tight, and Hesh is grateful for Tony's help. Melfi, however, doesn't want any gifts from Tony, not even a single cup of coffee. When Tony has her car stolen and fixed, she understandably loses her cool. Tony defends his choices by telling her he didn't want to see her get robbed, much like him helping Hesh. But unlike him, Melfi doesn't want Tony's help. Another way to look at this theme is Junior accepting help from Tony in terms of their conversation about Octavian and the joke about the bulls. Tony is there to try to smooth things over between Junior and the capos. One interesting caveat here is the joke about the bulls is similar to what Christopher tells Matt and Shuon in Season 2 about how you don't squeeze a mark until they're dry. You only squeeze a few drops and let them otherwise do their bidding so that you can hit them up week after week. This is a practical balance between generosity and greed. By being more even-handed, Junior is likely to collect more in the long run, since his capos will spend time earning and not going about in pity for themselves. This theme of charity versus greed comes out in other ways, like Johnny Sack sending over a cake for Carmela and Tony's anniversary dinner. Tony brings almond biscotti for Livia, whereas she waved away the treats he brought last time. This time she accepts them. Mikey bribes the guys at Patterson Falls, though this is for his own benefit so they don't tell the truth about Rusty Irish's last bath. The mechanic tells Melfi that he would like to rob her, but he won't replace the car's starter when it's already brand new. And Melfi tells Tony that she's generous because it's her job. Quite the opposite of Tony's line of work. It's also one of the 7 virtues and 7 vices I discussed regarding the 7 deadly sins of The Sopranos earlier. Another theme is that of tradition and of change. This is a pretty persistent theme throughout the show, going all the way back to the pilot and Tony lamenting the end of the good times. In this episode, there's a clear parallel between the Junior Hesh business conflict and the Carmela-Tony personal conflict as it relates to tradition and change. At the beginning of the episode, Mikey mentions how Junior isn't honoring past arrangements, and this soon includes Hesh being able to run his shy business tax-free. When Hesh approaches Tony, though, he mentions how it's not being taxed that he takes issue with, but the amount. Junior is the boss, and he sets the tune and everyone else dances. That's the way it's always been, and Hesh respects that. At their anniversary dinner, Carmela suggests going to the plaza afterwards, like they did last year. She resents that Tony has changed, though after speaking with Father Phil, she remembers that her vows are sacred. These conflicts, both business and personal, are resolved in their respective and appropriate ways, at a sit-down or with two people literally sitting down. The last theme I noticed was the Pax Soprana itself. How do these characters keep the peace? There's various combinations of manipulation going on. Some are honest about it, and some aren't. Tony is working behind the scenes to fix Hesh's conflict with Junior and Melfi's car trouble. He keeps a tight lid on his mob conspiracies, so Uncle Junior doesn't find out, but he's honest with Melfi. Livia is the one who suggested taxing Hesh to Junior in the first place, though she denies being involved when Tony visits her later. And Carmela admits to Tony that she resents Melfi's ability to help Tony, and that she's been upset due to jealousy. This theme of resolving conflict shows up in other ways. Junior has Rusty Irish whacked, which reminds me of Stalin's own quote about killing solving everything. No man, no problem. The Capos, like Hesh, ask Tony for help, and Melfi is very assertive about not wanting any. When the three Capos sit down with Tony to discuss Junior, I notice that Jimmy is disgruntled due to Junior not honoring old arrangements, such as Sammy's card game traditionally being untaxed in the past. Raymond is concerned about the card game too, but the point he makes is that once Jimmy's name is used, it should be the end of the story right then and there. Raymond is also concerned about Junior taxing too much and not sharing with the spoils. Larry Boy is concerned that a top earner won't be around to place large bets during football season. Each of these three capos are respectively concerned with the past, the present, and the future. Maybe each of them represent the id, the ego, and the superego, kind of like Freud. Or maybe I need more than a semester and a half of college. Pop culture. Memes. Like most episodes, there's a few memes here. Junior sarcastically telling Livia, and I'm playing shortstop for the Mets. Livia, regarding Hesh, rhetorically asking, who ever heard of a Jew riding horses? The dude's chilling at Patterson Falls after being asked by Mikey what happened to Rusty Irish. Some sad S-word. Mofo said he didn't want to live no more. Which is ironic since Rusty's death was to avenge a suicide. Sopranos vocabulary. Tony tells Melfi that his life is provolone something. This is a joke on 30-something, a show from the 1980s. While visiting Livia and being dissatisfied with Green Grove's coffee quality, Junior tells Livia that he'll buy her a machinetta. This is an Italian term for a mocha pot, which makes coffee with hot water and steam. Also, when Livia is manipulating Junior into taxing Hesh, Junior is able to figure out what she's doing, and notes how Livia must be so mad at Tony that she wants to crack his coglione. Coglione is an Italian slang term for male anatomy. Pardon my French, but he's saying she wants to break his balls. Carmela tells Tony that he skeeves her. This is Italian-American slang derived from the word scafare, which means to loathe or feel disgust for someone. When Tony visits Livia at Green Grove, Livia says she's hesitant to answer the door because she's avoiding the Cipruta, activities lady. Cipruta is Italian-American slang for fascia brutta, an Italian term that means ugly face. When Tony tells Junior everybody loved him, Octavian, because he never ate alone, capiche. Capiche is Italian for you understand? When I watched this episode in '99, I remembered Capiche from Saving Private Ryan, which came out the prior summer. Junior tells Tony that he's been acting mezzo morto lately. Mezzo morto is Italian for half dead. At Hess's horse farm, Tony refers to his family as Kazee, which is the plural of Kazoo. Junior jokingly referred to Tony as a crazy Kazoo at the end of Meadowlands. Kazoo means a part of male anatomy, so Tony is basically calling his family a bunch of D-heads. Sopranos trivia. When Junior visits Livia, she remarks about him wearing canoe. This is an old French cologne from the 1930s. They still sell it today. I ordered some online and tried it. It smells French. Tony brings his mother biscotti from Ferrara's, an Italian bakery in Little Italy in New York City. Earlier this season, he brought her some macarons from the same bakery. Livia complains about her neighbor running water all the time and says she's living next to Gunga Din. Gunga Din is a story written by Rudyard Kipling about a water carrier in India who brings water to British soldiers. It was made into a film in 1939. The tailor's grandson who died was named Dominic, which coincidentally, Junior is played by actor Dominic Chianese. When Melfi is at home, she's reading a book, Riven Rock by T.C. Boyle. Published in 1998, this is a historical fiction novel about a wealthy man with mental health issues and a woman who tries to help him. Not entirely unlike what Melfi is doing with Tony. Highly allegorical, The Sacred and the Rock. Carmela buys an excessive quantity of furniture from Roche Boys. Roche Boys is a high-end furniture store. They're still in business today. You can find them online. Richard D. Domenico, the actor who plays the undercover FBI agent, waiter guy snapping pictures of the mafiosos, played the priest in the movie A Bronx Tale. John Palumbo, who has an uncredited role as the FBI agent adjusting the bulletin board, played Don Zaghi on Oz, another late 90s HBO show. Junior's coronation. The banquet at the end of the episode is really the coronation of Junior as boss, with all the capos holding up a glass and proclaiming, "To Junior!" This tradition goes back to feudal Europe, in which newly crowned kings would accept oaths of fealty from the nobility that owed their direct allegiance to the monarch. That's why the capos do this, but not the rank-and-file associates of every crew. An important distinction here is Johnny Sack raising a glass and saying salute. The capos all say "To Junior," except Tony, who says, "To our new boss, salute." Salute means "to your health," cheers in Italian by the way, and in the context here it's comparable to saying "Long live the king." Johnny Sack only says salute because he's representing the New York families. His presence here and him saying salute is a sign of respect from them, a gesture to show that they'll show him the respect of having a sit-down if any conflict arises between the Sopranos and New York. This is not surprising, as Tony mentions in Meadowlands, Junior has the backing of New York to become boss. Therefore, it would be insincere for Johnny Sack to say "To Junior," which is why he doesn't, I suppose. One detail I did notice on my rewatch is how Hess shares some math with Tony. $250K in taxes and Junior divided amongst the 5 Sopranos family capos. We know about Tony, Jimmy Altieri, Larry Boy Barisi, and Raymond. Junior was a capo, but he's been moved to boss. So who's the 5th capo? I thought it might be Mikey, but the internet tells me Mikey was never a capo. And Mikey doesn't say "To Junior" at the banquet. But later in the season, Silvio tells Tony that Mikey stopped getting his hands dirty and starts relying on Chucky Signor to whack guys for him, because Mikey gets moved up too high in the mob hierarchy. So I don't really know. I wonder if Junior is still technically the capo of his own crew, so he pocketed 1/5 of the back tax for himself. What do you think? Music. The ending scene of this show is one of the more memorable endings. The instrumental version of Paparazzi by Exhibit plays as the FBI secretly takes photos of the mobsters and reviews them at a field office. David Chase is known to have personally chosen much of the music for the show, but this particular musical choice is sometimes credited to Frank Renzulli, the writer of this episode, or to Catherine Dayek, the show's music supervisor. I'm not sure whose choice it was, but it's iconic to say the least. Now for the whack count. This episode has 1 whack. Mikey's second on-screen whack is Rusty Irish, with an assist from Joseph Joey Eggs Marino. The whack running total broken down by character. Mikey is in the lead with 2 whacks, 1 in denial, anger, acceptance, Brendan, and 1 from this episode, Rusty Irish. Christopher has 1 whack from the pilot, email, and Tony has 1 whack from college, Fabian. For the total deaths, the running total is 6 deaths, 4 whacks, and then there's the 1 accidental death, the trucker from 46 Long, and there's 1 natural death, Jackie dying from cancer in Meadowlands. And now it's time for some conclusions. After college, the sublime but unconventional episode. Pax Soprana is a return to Sopranos' true form as a tried-and-true formula. More than 2 plotlines interwoven among characters and themes divided between Tony's business and personal life, in a timelessly relatable way to both people living in 1999 and today. It continues the season-long arc of Tony's growing conflict with Junior and Libya. There's a big step here in terms of world building. The New York families, something mentioned by Junior all the way back in the pilot, is finally shown here in the character of Johnny Sack. And the FBI, the government agency using surveillance and informants to destroy the mob, is no longer a hypothetical threat but a very real danger. Although Tony can definitely navigate the dark underworld of the mob using subterfuge and lies, someone in a bright fluorescent office is piecing together the truth. And that's all I have for episode 6 of season 1, Pax Soprana. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like this video. I'll be continuing my rewatch with episode 7. And as soon as I have that, I'll upload it for y'all. Until then, have a good one. Video over!